I'm from the future. I get in a car and I slide through time.
Exactly correct. You inhabit two worlds. So far, I see nothing strange.
Oh boy, it's a time travel podcast. My name is Nate, and living his true golden age.
Wow.
It's Brian Martin.
Hello, everybody. We had a good one, hopefully, for you tonight. We're going to be talking about one of my personal favorite movies of the 21st century.
Really?
It really is.
Wow. Okay, well, that's news in and of itself. I didn't know that.
Yeah, this movie, we're talking about Midnight in Paris this week, spinning out of the last episode where we talked about literature of the 1800s.
Yeah,
we're going to be talking about some literary figures of the early 20th century.
See, that would have been a great segue for me at the start. I think what threw me off is this prior conversation that we had. We both saw an article about Quantum Leap.
Yeah, we're going to dig into sort of the old ways of 4 episodes ago when we were still a Quantum Leap podcast. We're going to dip back into that here and talk a little bit about some things that have come to light.
Yeah, I feel like it's pertinent just based on our history alone.
Yeah.
Where we came from. Den of Geek, that's where I saw it. That's where you saw it?
There was an article on Den of Geek that was talking about one of the original showrunners of Quantum Leap who appeared on another Quantum Leap podcast that is, in fairness, hosted by someone who used to write Quantum Leap novels.
Yes, I think it's the Quantum Leap podcast.
It's
we are a Quantum Leap podcast.
We are simply a Quantum Leap podcast.
Well, not any longer.
Brian Winbrandt was on the show and talked about their original plan to bring Sam into the series.
Right.
Now, this would be the original creators / showrunners who were dismissed and then replaced during season 1.
Yeah, we don't really know how that happened. Dismissed. They just didn't like where it was going.
Experiment that went a little caca.
Or maybe
Martin Garrow and those guys talked about how they had to take what was already in motion and adapt it into a revised plan for season 1.
Right.
And it sounds, based on this, that revised plan for season 1 was, okay, so Sam's not coming back anymore. So what do we do now?
Yeah.
And maybe that's why those original showrunners were dismissed, because they couldn't get Scott Bakula to come back.
Well, tell us what they actually said.
Well, first, I should preface it by saying that some of the issues we had with Quantum Leap Season 1, it was the presence of Janice. Why was Janice there? What was Janice doing? Was she nefarious? Was she not nefarious? What was Ben's role in all of that? Because we knew Ben and Janice had worked together before Ben leaped. What was all that about? And evidently, Sam would have become a part of the series because he would have been working directly with Janice Calavici in the present day in someone else's body. So he had leaped into someone and was working with Janice to, I guess, work on something that would ultimately bring him home.
Yeah.
So he's trying to bring himself home by working directly with Janice at the project in 2022.
And inhabiting a body in a longer duration.
The direct quote is, he would have actually inhabited a person who he stayed in for a while.
Yeah, which, as we now know, you black that person out for the better part of, months? A year?
Right.
You're
just stealing a dude's life at that point.
Hopefully, at that point, when the concept was being offered, maybe that wasn't the idea for a leap, because that would be almost villainous to do that to somebody.
It
doesn't seem like something Sam would do.
It would be rough. And then the season would have ended with the team trying to get Ben home, but instead Sam comes out. And Ben is out there lost in time. And then he goes on to talk that season 2 would have then explored the repercussions of Sam finally make it home. What's that look like? What's it like having him in the world? Which sounds to me like, what is Ben, just chopped liver?
Yeah, a little bit.
what is your show about at that point? Like, I'm reading this and I'm like, if this was the whole thing you gave to NBC, I don't know that I would have kept you on. You know?
Yeah.
None of it sounds like a good idea to me.
No. What I take away from that, we've talked about before, I don't think the bulk of the fan base take the finale the way it was meant to be.
Yes.
It's shocking. The amount of people.
I almost promise you all, dear listeners, that this is the last time we're going to go on a tirade about this.
Yeah, it's true. I've talked about it more than a couple of times, but there's no reason for Sam to want to come home, especially now.
Right.
Like you've said before, his best friend is dead. Who knows where his wife is? He's never known his daughter. Like, there's no reason for him to, quote unquote, come home to 2024.
He is in some way controlling his leaps.
Yeah, he's not even inhabiting bodies anymore.
He can theoretically come home if he wants to.
Yeah.
He didn't want to.
So there's an episode earlier in our run here where we talked about the pitch that I had worked up of my own volition. And I was working from the standpoint that, okay, he doesn't inhabit bodies anymore and he can just go from here to there, wherever he wanted to go. And he had ascended to another level, you know? That's what that finale says to me. Like, he's not trapped in time. He's not lost in time. And I don't understand why other viewers didn't get that.
I've never read that final line, Dr. Sam Beckett never returned home, as a tragedy.
No.
It's not like, oh, no, he's lost forever. No, he discovered who he truly was, and he never came home because he embraced that.
Exactly.
I mean, like, am I the stupid one for taking it like that?
No, not unless I'm also stupid.
I just don't know.
But there's an argument.
Well, we established
for that.
last week. Dave,
Exactly. There's an argument for that. The other thing about that article really seemed to me like they're throwing Scott Bakula under the bus too.
Like it's his fault the show failed.
Yeah. Doesn't it?
Right.
It reads that way. Like, I'm not sure if that's what he was going for, but it was sort of like, we brought this idea up to Scott, and this is what the show was going to be, and we were going to do this, and we were going to bring Scott home, but then Scott didn't want to do it, and we kind of had to respect that.
Yeah.
You know, and it's kind of like, okay, it's more likely that he read that and was like, no. Like, what is that for a revival?
That seems, yeah.
It seems more likely that he wasn't on board with your pitch. And if that's what your pitch was, I don't blame the guy. I think he had too much love for the original to take it in that direction.
And I think there's truth to the fact that Dean Stockwell's passing was probably the nail in the coffin. I hate that metaphor in this case, but like probably mostly the reason why he was like, okay, I'm out. I'm not going to do any more Quantum Leap because it was a him and Dean thing, right?
Maybe.
So,
but at the same time, even if you read that as he is trapped in time and he needs someone to save him, that's not an interesting way to do it, in my opinion.
Why would he have had to come back in 2022 specifically?
Exactly.
First. Second, he would have been leaping into the future to do that. And I'm sure there's some things that came into this new series that might not have existed had Scott Bakula done the show. Like the idea of going into that nuclear winter future where Ben met Ian and the accelerator was pulling him back from the future, right? Like that's probably something that wouldn't have been there. I have to wonder, at what point in the original version of this did Janice drug her mother? Was that in the initial Sam Beckett pitch?
Yeah, see, I don't think any of that was in there. Maybe they were just scrambling for ideas at that point.
Yeah.
It really was very haphazard. We felt like that when we saw the pilot and then saw what was supposed to be the pilot 13 episodes later or whatever, you know?
Yeah. It felt disjointed. It felt like ideas kind of stopped and started, particularly with Janice's janky imaging chamber that really didn't come to any great results until the finale of the series.
Right.
Reading this, it's like easier to see at least why everything felt disjointed. One team was laying all these breadcrumbs, And the other team was like, well, what are we going to do with all these breadcrumbs?
Right.
Because it's not leading to what the original idea was anymore. So now we've got to completely reverse engineer these breadcrumbs and turn them into something.
Right. Now there's that fan out there listening to us saying, no, this is exactly what I wanted my revival to be. I want Sam to come home. I want them to try and find Sam. People were talking about that with the show that we got. When is Sam going to show up? How are they going to bring Sam home? So
it's like the middle of season 2, and it's like, when is Sam coming back? It's like, brother,
yeah,
you're not watching that show.
Yeah. So I think we may even be in the minority in this opinion. So it might be good that we moved off of the Quantum Leap.
We truly are.
Yeah.
I would almost guarantee it. Because it's like, among the Quantum Leap fan base, the finale of the show has been, I'm not going to use words like reviled, because I don't think it's that. But
it's close.
People look at it as a low point.
Yeah. And other people are still wrestling with the fact that Hannah's program didn't actually bring Ben home. I've seen that online.
Yeah. I saw you left a comment on, I think, a Facebook group.
Yes, right. There was a Facebook group that somebody had just come to the realization that maybe he wasn't meant to come. Like, are you kidding me? Guy.
I was looking for a GIF of that football team from Beetlejuice to put on that, where they're like, Coach, I don't think we survived that crash. And it's like 20 minutes into it. They've been loitering around the recently dead office,
Yeah, it's like, catch up, man.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I don't know that either of the series finales were particularly well received. I think that the second series finale is probably better, but only because they could see more story going.
Yeah, it somehow demonstrates exactly where the next story would go, which is something the original one doesn't do.
Right.
Like, you just don't know what happens to him next. But as a finale, the story of season 2 builds to a crescendo and then delivers in an emotional way on what it's built towards. And you're like, if this is the last thing we ever get with these characters, and at this point it looks like it will be,
right,
it's emotionally satisfying, and it speaks to the overall theme of what this whole show has been about. And it's been about Ben and Addison.
And not Sam.
And not Sam. Sorry to say, it's not about Sam. It's about these two crazy lovebirds.
To me, it really did feel like they were throwing Bakula under the bus a little bit. So, at any rate, if that had been the idea, I'm glad we didn't get it.
Yeah.
So, go back and listen to our episode about the Memoriam, get our full feelings on the Departed revival. A lot more thoughts on the topic, but probably not things we need to revisit here, I would think.
But speaking of revisiting bygone eras.
Ooh!
Look at that. See, I told you, damn it. It was going to be a seamless transition. Nate, I have a question for you.
All right.
Have you ever thought to yourself, man, I really wish I had lived in this different era, or I should have been born 50 years ago during this era or that era? Have you ever found yourself idealizing an era of the past? Like, I'm thinking I don't know that you'd want to live in the Old West. Like, I don't think Doc Brown's plan for retirement is exactly what was in the cards for you.
No,
that's a lot of
fantasy.
Back then.
That's fantasy for sure. I'd say the closest that I get is I do like the fashion of the 70s.
Oh, yeah.
Butterfly collars and oranges and browns. I'm all about it.
Yeah, did we just not, that didn't make a comeback. It's not making a comeback, or is it not happening now?
Has it been 30 years on?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's supposed to go in 30-year cycles, so maybe we're just missing that part. We got the bell-bottoms and we got the low-rise jeans.
That's true.
But the butterfly collar and the ascot never came back.
That's a shame.
The neckerchief.
That's a real shame.
But to your point, no, not really. I don't think I could live with using a phone book. Now that there's an internet.
This is a movie that was made at the last possible time in human history that it could have been made, because it was right on the cusp of smartphones.
Yeah.
And now it is probably very hard for any one of us to think about going back to a life before the world was truly at your fingertips.
Right.
But the idea behind the 2011 film Midnight in Paris is that,
Yes. What is this movie about, Brian?
well, it's about thinking of past eras as sort of a golden age that you're idealizing and wanting to be there and be a part of a movement that we all know and recognize in the present as just this magical period where artists and writers were all just in a sort of this cultural stew, right? Cosmic gumbo, as some might call it. Directed by Woody Allen, but don't hold that against the movie, please. And clocking in at a sweet, sweet 94 minutes. Midnight in Paris follows Gil Pender, played by Owen Wilson, as a Woody Allen surrogate, because Woody was a little bit too old to play characters like this at that point. Gil is a screenwriter struggling to finish his first novel while on vacation in Paris with his fiancée Inez, played by Rachel McAdams, and her affluent parents, played by Kurt Fuller and Mimi Kennedy. You might remember Kurt Fuller as that asshole mayor's aide Jack Hardemeyer in Ghostbusters 2.
Yeah, he's been in a lot of stuff.
He's been in a ton of things. And
Great
he's
character
always,
actor.
He is. He really, really is. He plays this sort of role a lot. This sort of uppity, staunch Republican kind of...
Right, yeah, stick up his ass kind of guy.
As they tour Paris, Gil finds himself pulled into the history of the art movement of the 1920s, particularly the lost generation of American writers who moved to the city and were similarly entranced by it. One night, walking home after a wine tasting, Gil is literally pulled into history as a car pulls up beside him and the occupants beckon him to join. He is then whisked away to a party whose attendees include F. Scott Fitzgerald, played by Tom Hiddleston, and his wife Zelda Fitzgerald, played by Alison Pill, and later that night, Gil meets Ernest Hemingway, played by Corey Stahl, who offers to show Gil's book to Gertrude Stein, played by Kathy Bates. Star-studded cast, folks.
Yes.
And the night leaves Gil's head swirling. Although he returns to present day as the night ends, he continues hopping in the car night after night as he pursues feedback on his writing from some of the greatest to ever do it, and finds himself falling in love with a costume designer named Adriana, played by the enchanting Marion Cotillard. In the present, the divide between Gil and his materialistic fiancée becomes increasingly pronounced. You could pretty much tell from the opening lines that these two do not belong together.
I mean, this is unbelievable. Look at this. There's no city like this in the world. There never was.
You act like you've never been here before.
I don't get here often enough. That's the problem. Can you picture how drop-dead gorgeous this city is in the rain? Imagine this town in the 20s. Paris in the 20s. In the rain, the artists and writers.
Why does every city have to be in the rain? What's wonderful about getting wet?
I mean, could you ever picture us maybe moving here after we're married?
Oh, God, no.
And the movie just drags that out for 90 minutes.
Yeah.
One night, as they walk the streets of 1920s Paris, Gil and Adriana are picked up by a horse-drawn carriage, which takes them even further back to the late 1800s and the Belle Epoque, an era that Adriana idealizes. They go to the Moulin Rouge. They meet Henri Toulouse-Lautrec, Paul Gauguin, and Edgar Degas, who all pine for the Renaissance. Gil seems shocked that they could all fail to see the magic of the era they are living in at that moment, and as Adriana decides to remain in the past, he comes to a conclusion that the present, no matter when it is, always feels disappointing compared to earlier golden eras. Returning to 2010, Gil breaks up with Inez and decides to remain in Paris, striking up a conversation with a shopkeeper played by Léa Seydoux as they walk off into the rain together. And that's, in a nutshell, Midnight in Paris.
Good synopsis.
Couple things worth noting right off the bat, and this is one of the reasons I wanted to do this one, is that this is the second film in the Rachel McAdams My Boyfriend is a Time Traveler trilogy. It's also the second one of the three where her dad is a staunch Republican. But for whatever reason, by happenstance or by design, Rachel McAdams starred in 3 movies in which her boyfriend was a time traveler. The first of which was The Time Traveler's Wife.
Right. Go back and listen to that episode.
And now we have Midnight in Paris, part 2 of this weird trilogy.
Right.
The other thing, Nate, I wanted to share with you here. See that picture?
I do see that picture. I think I recognized that young gentleman.
It's a tender wee lad of, I don't know, about 32, 33? I think it was 33.
Okay. So where are you there?
Those are the steps in the movie.
Oh, yeah?
Those
they
are
don't
the
look
steps.
like they're on a corner in that picture.
From a different angle, they're not exactly on a corner. They don't face that same turn in the road
Okay.
in reality, but
So in the movie, the cars kind of come up this sort of windy road, and the stairs appear to be sort of at a corner. In the picture I'm looking at here, it doesn't quite look the same, but I do recognize the steps themselves.
now that building is at a corner. The steps aren't on
Okay.
a corner, but that building is on a corner.
So did you go there specifically because of the movie?
I did.
Okay.
Yeah, I went all around Paris, in fact, looking for filming locations from this movie.
Wow. That's a lot of fun. So you have some real reverence for this movie. I don't think we can just gloss over the fact that this is Woody Allen. And I know that we've...
No, you can't. Top to bottom, this is a Woody Allen movie.
Yes. In fact, Owen Wilson is basically playing Woody Allen.
Yes.
You can just hear Woody Allen delivering all of those lines. It's clear that he wrote it for himself, which is just what he's comfortable doing, and it's worked for him for his entire career. But
yeah, if it ain't broke.
yeah, exactly. But I feel like we've kind of touched on this before with some other death of the author situations. For example, I was going to share this movie with my wife. I thought, oh, well, we're going to watch this movie for the podcast, and finally it's something that I can watch with Jamie. And, you know, she likes Woody Allen. And when I posed hey, let's, curl up on the couch and watch this movie, it's like, I can't like Woody Allen anymore, And
Yeah.
it was like she didn't want to watch the movie. And I kind of understood that. Are you able to just kind of separate that? And then where is the line?
I think the line changes. Where I've stood in the past is, especially in regards to movies, there are hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people that work on a movie, right?
Sure.
As opposed to when somebody is like a musician, it's a little bit easier to say, well, I'm just not listening to that guy anymore. Or when a guy's a writer, it's like, well, I guess I'm done with that guy. We know that Joss Whedon is a problematic figure now.
Yes.
But have we given up on the Avengers? Not really, right?
Well, they don't mention it very often, do they?
They don't. Yeah, I guess not. The truth is, I think it's up to the individual to figure out where that line is drawn. For me, the power of this movie and the way it speaks to me about fundamental aspects of the human existence, I can't release this one. This is one I can't let this movie go.
Sure. And the problem is some people are going to say, oh, you're wrong. And other people are going to say, I get it. You know
I
what I
don't
mean?
think anybody's wrong. I think you're wrong if you like this movie because Woody Allen is a skeevy guy. Like, that's the only way you're quote-unquote wrong, is it's like, I'm going to watch this movie because he groomed his stepdaughter.
I hear you. I don't want to dwell on this, but I didn't want to gloss over the fact that this is, in fact, Woody Allen, and some people are going to feel different about it.
Yeah. I mean, it's like...
And it's interesting to consider all these problematic figures. You've got, like you mentioned, Joss Whedon.
Roman Polanski.
Oh, Roman Polanski's kind of the...
Prime example.
Yeah, sure. And who was it that directed X-Men?
Bryan Singer.
Bryan Singer's like at this point, who's not a problem? I introduced myself to Planet of the Apes this past weekend, and of course, the Green Goblin's in it, and that's that's a problem. So there's really no way around it, it seems, with a lot of the media that we've consumed and enjoyed. So, pick and choose, just kind of struggle through with some of it, and I guess it comes down to, is the piece of art something that you can separate from the actions of the person?
Yeah, I think it's like a question you have to ask yourself, why am I watching this? Why am I consuming this? Right?
Right. Sure.
And if the answer is because I like who this director is as a human, then maybe you should rethink yourself. But if it's because I appreciate the performances of literally every person in this movie, I appreciate the loving way in which Paris is filmed, throughout the movie. Every aspect of this movie is something that captures cinematic magic to me.
I don't know what kind of history you have with it outside of what you've mentioned thus far, but this is a first-time watch for me.
Okay.
And I'm watching it after knowing things about Woody Allen. Like, you may have seen the movie before certain things really became a problem.
Yeah, things definitely haven't gotten better for Woody Allen since
No.
this movie came out.
But at any rate, let's just kind of get into the movie and treat the movie for what it is. And I don't hate this. I like this quite a bit.
Yeah. I think this movie kind of puts people like us at a disadvantage because we write. Sculpting words into a story is something that we think about a lot, right? Mm-hmm. Gil is a screenwriter who's trying to write a novel. So, I mean, like, there are aspects of this character that immediately appeal to people like us.
For sure.
Right?
Yeah.
So, right out of the gate, I'm invited to see things from this character's perspective.
I do enjoy this movie. It was a little harder for me, I assume, to become immersed in the world than it was probably for you, because most of these characters that he's meeting, Hemingway, Fitzgerald, Stein, I don't know a lot about. And I have a feeling that you're a little more well-read.
Yeah, I mean, you're not wrong in that I'm sitting there, I'm watching this movie the first time, and Tom Hiddleston shows up, and Alison Pill show up, and somehow their performance captures exactly what you imagine this person to have been in real life.
Okay.
If you've only ever read The Great Gatsby.
Right.
And I'll tell you, my favorite performance in this movie, and there are so many good performances in this movie, is Corey Stoll as Hemingway, because he speaks exactly as you would expect him to. He's just direct, to the point. He speaks the way he writes.
Okay.
Hemingway?
You liked my book?
Liked? I loved all your work.
Yes, it was a good book because it was an honest book. And that's what war does to men. And there's nothing fine and noble about dying in the mud, unless you die gracefully. And then it's not only noble, but brave.
And he is so hilarious. Like, he's so hilariously serious about everything he's talking about all the time.
Yeah, he's great. They're all great, and I can appreciate all of them.
So the second Hemingway shows up in this movie, the first time I'm watching it, I am immediately grinning ear to ear. Because I'm like, this is perfect. That Hemingway is perfect.
Okay. Yeah, I can certainly appreciate the performances, but as far as the body of work, I've read The Great Gatsby in high school.
Sure.
I can't remember the last time I read anything by Hemingway, but it was probably high school.
Yeah.
This isn't a world that I romanticize. I don't know if it's one that you do. Maybe you even can identify with Gil more than I can. I don't know. So a lot of these characters are just characters to me.
Okay.
With names that I recognize. But that being said, and I really thought you'd bring up my text, dude.
I was going to go easy on you this week.
This movie is rough. I'm too stupid to watch this. It's a joke because clearly the movie communicates everything that it needs to communicate without you having read The Great Gatsby cover to cover.
Yeah, and it does it because you're seeing things through Gil's perspective.
Yeah.
We understand because we can see how Gil is responding to this and how dazzled he is. What it's kind of like is like the experience Gil has is kind of like taking the entire 30-year span of Forrest Gump and compressing it into about 4 nights in Paris. The way he's just stumbling into famous people. I think maybe the third time he goes back, he's at this nightclub dancing with Josephine Baker. And it's not mentioned. She's not mentioned by name, as I recall. She might be, but like...
I think as like they're leaving or something.
Really,
he didn't know she was in there or something like that.
There are so many characters just mentioned in passing. Right. That are just incidental to what's going on. And he just kind of stumbles into. Like, I love the scene in the diner where Adriana kind of walks off and leaves him there, and suddenly he's at a table with Salvador Dali, right?
It's not until right now that I'm kind of drawing parallels to Alan Moore's A League of Extraordinary Gentlemen.
Yeah, very much like that.
If you're familiar with that book at all, I don't know the books that those characters come out of cover to cover. I've read The Invisible Man. I know the story of Jekyll and Hyde, right? But I can enjoy The League of Extraordinary Gentlemen without necessarily knowing everything I need to know about each of those characters, in the same way that I enjoy this movie because the environment has been well captured by the camera.
Yeah. It's so fully realized.
It's fully realized. It's beautifully shot. And I could care less about Paris, but this movie certainly makes me realize why other people could love it.
That's great, and that's it.
And it's the same idea with the creatives and the writers that he's so drawn to. I'm not crazy about F. Scott Fitzgerald, but I love the fact that he is.
Yes.
And so it works. It works for both of us, even though we're coming from different perspectives, I feel like.
That's what's remarkable about this, is that I think it's a very approachable movie for anyone. Let's just talk about the time travel that is at work here is extraordinarily passive. Talking about how fully realized the world is and how effortless it is to settle into the world that the movie provides. Even the time travel itself is just, oh, okay, once it happens, there's nothing remarkable about it, about the time travel itself. It's simply a thing that happens.
Yeah, it's just incorporated into the environment.
There's a point at which the movie stops even showing it to you. You don't even see the point where he time travels. It just cuts to a new scene, and there he is with Gertrude Stein again, and we're taking it in stride the whole time.
For sure.
But it's so universally approachable because of that.
So the story, the themes are very obvious.
From the beginning. Before you see anybody on screen, the themes are obvious.
Yes. And any story needs a good character realization and change. I'm this person at the beginning, I'm this person at the end, because this thing happened.
Yes.
Or I went through this thing. It's simple, it's structured, which I love. I'm a structured guy. So that's all very, very clear. There are a couple of things that I pose to you because I'm not really sure where I come down on them.
Okay.
The first one, you mentioned it. Inez and Gil are clearly, from the get-go, not right for each other. And through the entire course of the movie, there is very little to nothing redeeming about Inez, in my eyes. And I wonder if the movie could have done better, making that relationship a little more rounded to where you can feel both sides of it. Because right now, Gil is the hero.
Yeah, I don't think we're supposed to feel both sides of it.
Okay.
I defy anybody to find a single line that Inez says in this movie that is in any way complimentary, just purely complimentary of Gil's character.
No, not at all.
Other than the fact that he
close.
makes decent money. That's the only thing, and that's not a character trait.
And even that's in passing.
More often, she's saying something at his expense.
Gil is a complete romantic. I mean, he would be more than happy living in a complete state of perpetual denial.
The first night he travels back in time, they've been at a wine tasting. Gil wants to walk. Inez is going out dancing with Paul and his wife. And the next morning, her words to him were, "A good thing you didn't go last night. You would have hated the music and the crowd, but I had fun." Like, it's like everything is a dig. Everything is what a drag Gil is. Meanwhile, Gil seems like he's the only one out here enjoying the moment and living where he is. What do Inez's parents do the second night they're in Paris?
Yeah.
They go to an American movie that they don't remember the name of.
Right.
But they enjoyed it because it was an American movie. And yes, it is cranked up to 11, but I've traveled pretty extensively, been to Paris, I've been around the world. There are two types of travelers. Actual travelers, and there are tourists, right? Inez and her family, they are tourists. They never leave, nor do they want to leave their American bubble. And they expect the world to conform to them as they move through a space. I'm American, and you better recognize it.
There are our sightseers.
If I never see another charming boulevard or bistro again,
What a town.
That's to visit.
I could see myself living here. I feel like the Parisians kind of get me. I could see myself just strolling along the left bank with a Baguette under my arm, headed to Cafe de Flore to scribble away on my book. What did Hemingway say? He called it a movable feast.
In this traffic, nothing moves.
Gil is a traveler. Gil is out there wandering around, just meeting people, seeing what he can absorb about the culture and experience in this city. That is, in my opinion, it's a great city. But yeah, like from the jump, the very first lines of the movie were Gil saying, wouldn't this city look beautiful in the rain? And then Inez starts complaining about the rain.
What's wonderful about getting wet?
And so immediately they're at odds over something as simple as the weather.
Yeah, through the entire movie, I'm just thinking, like, how does he not see that this is not working? You know,
How did he ever think that
yeah,
this
how did
worked?
this? How are these two ever? I mean, actually, that's not true. You see couples like this all the time, where you're, you know, like, what are these two people doing together?
Yeah.
Like, clearly. But I did kind of wonder.
Sometimes you need Ernest Hemingway to point it out to you.
Yeah, that's fun.
Because sometimes your friends will say it, and you'll be like, uh-huh, okay. But when Ernest Hemingway says it, you're like, oh, shit. Papa Hemingway said it? I better listen.
Yeah. So I don't know. Part of me wondered whether she should have a little more than one side to her. I'm just not sure that I like the fact that she's all wrong and he's all right.
Would we have accepted Adriana
I don't know.
as quickly? You know, like
I
that's
don't
the
know.
thing.
That's
I don't
the
think
thing,
we would have.
right?
I
Yeah.
think that part of the reason Adriana works is because we, the audience, already know how messed up Gil's relationship is, and then here comes this perfect,
right,
just vision.
They're both dreamers.
They're both dreamers, but like Adriana is Paris in human form to Gil. All the wonder and magic
golden
and
age.
allure is right there compressed into this immensely charming and engaging person.
Sure. Yeah.
So I just don't think, for the type of story this is trying to tell, you've got to just kind of play it at these extremes. But I totally agree that it's like really hard to visualize a time where these two would have ever thought they belonged together.
The only reason I bring it up is because it's so structured. Those walls that are put up between those characters make everything obvious. And so it's not as rich as the world is. The relationships between the characters are just so clear that sometimes I wonder if things should be a little more nuanced. But I see what he's doing, and I just thought it was worth bringing up. The second point is this boyfriend,
Paul.
Paul is just insufferable, which he's supposed to be.
Played by Michael Sheen. Profoundly unlikable is how I put him. And I love that he's characterized as a pseudo-intellectual, because that's
pseudo-intellectual and pedantic.
The pedantic fellow, yeah.
Yes.
Being Moudon. He died of the flu, if I'm not mistaken, in 1917, I believe.
That's very good, sir. So knowledgeable, isn't he?
Yeah. So much of Rodin's work was influenced by his wife, Camille.
Yes, she was an influence, though Camille was not the wife, but his mistress.
Camille? No.
Yes. Yes, Rose was the wife.
No, he was never married to Rose.
Yes, he did marry Rose in the last year of their lives.
I think you're mistaken.
Are you arguing with the guide?
Yes, I am.
Yeah, no, I'm certain, monsieur.
Yeah, actually, she's right. I recently read a 2-volume biography on Rodin, and Rose was definitely the wife, Camille the mistress.
You read that?
Yeah,
Where did you read
I
that?
just read. I was surprised because I mistakenly thought, like you, that it was, the other way around. It's an easy mistake.
So tonight.
So there's another character to hate, and he's easy to hate, and we all know somebody like him.
And the fact that Inez fawns over him just makes both of them so much worse.
Exactly. It illustrates what we've been saying about Inez the whole time.
And then right after we meet Paul, Rachel McAdams is like, maybe you should give your book to Paul so he can proofread it for you and give you advice. Yeah, because Paul is better than I am. Thank you.
Right, because he's an expert at everything.
Like, what? Just awful. This is so toxic.
Yes, a guy that believes he speaks intelligently on every topic under the sun. It frustrates me that at the very outset, he delivers the theme of the movie and he's right.
And just which era would you have preferred to live in, Miniver Chibi?
Paris in the 20s, in the rain.
Wouldn't have
When the
been
rain
bad.
was an acid rain, sorry.
Oh, I see. And no global warming, no TV, and suicide bombing, and nuclear weapons, drug
the
cartels.
usual menu of cliched horror stories.
Well, you know, nostalgia is denial. Denial of the painful present. And the name for this fallacy is called golden age thinking.
Ah, touche.
Yeah, the erroneous notion that a different time period is better than the one one's living in. You know, it's a flaw in the romantic imagination of those people who find it difficult to cope with the present.
And he's right, yeah. He absolutely is correct.
I don't know that sits well with me.
You don't want him to be right.
No, this guy's not supposed to be right about anything. He was wrong about Picasso's painting. He was wrong about Rodin's sculpture.
He's an expert on French wine. Oh, really? No kidding.
Paul is an expert on French wine.
You're joking,
Get
really?
Of course, of course.
Okay, an expert.
When did you read the biography on Rodin?
Me?
Yeah.
Why would I read a biography on Rodin?
No kidding, right? And I kind of went back second viewing and realized, oh shit, he's delivering the line right at the outset of the movie.
It's right there, yeah.
And it's coming from the one person that I wouldn't want it to come from. So I don't know how I feel about that either.
Yeah, but how did it...
all that's missing is Gil saying, oh shit, Paul was right.
I guess if you want to find a silver lining here, Gil came to this process naturally through self-realization, and Paul just read about it in a book.
Okay. Okay.
I don't know. I get what you're saying, though.
Conversely, I love the way Gil comes to this realization. I mean, very organically, the person who he's connected with, he recognizes that fault in her that allows it to reflect into him.
It's all the best scenes. All the best movies end with a scene like Last Crusade. Right? Elsa reaching for the grail and falling into the pit, and then Indy reaching for the grail and almost falling into the pit. You suddenly see, oh, this is what I could become. And maybe I've been wrong with the way I've been thinking about this.
Yeah. Very deftly written and produced. The story is great.
Why'd it have to be Paul?
I feel like in another draft, what is the advantage to having Paul put that out to us at the beginning? Is it to set us all off the target at the beginning, to dismiss that
he can't
out?
possibly be right.
Yeah,
he's wrong about everything.
Just dismiss it at the beginning, like, oh, we don't like this guy. He's just, of course, the guy can work in a nostalgia shop. The character in his book works at a nostalgia shop because the main character of his book basically represents him. Right?
Yes, all the characters in his book represent Inez,
which you come
Paul,
to learn later. Yeah.
They're all in there.
Maybe it's just to get us to identify with Gil as much as possible, to push us away from that realization at the beginning of the movie, so that when we have it together at the end, we're not waiting for the main character to come to the realization. We're all doing it together.
We're on the journey with
him.
Yeah, I think that's it.
Maybe that's what it is.
Because,
I don't know.
Because it does create this greater sense of alienation with Gil.
You remember that show, Alien Nation?
I do remember that show, Alien Nation.
I love that. I love that title.
Yeah, it is good.
Anyway, sorry.
But I think it is. I think it's just another way for us to connect with Gil in all the ways that matter on an emotional level early on. Because, I mean, if you're the kind of person who is watching this and you're connecting with Inez and her dad and mom, then you really need to look inside yourself.
Right, right. The more I think about it, I think it's really just to align the audience's thoughts with Gil's as much as possible.
Gil is thinking beyond reason. What Gil is thinking about in this whimsical way is beyond rationality, right? And Paul is presenting this as a very rational kind of argument. And it makes sense, but because Paul's the one saying it, we don't want to believe it.
Yeah,
we want to believe in the magic that Gil is believing in, and this sort of just idealization.
Yeah, what's wrong with being a dreamer?
In the past. Yeah, exactly.
What's wrong with getting wrapped up in the romance of a city?
Yeah. And at the end of the day, I think that Paul's read, while on the surface pretty correct, I think it overlooks a lot of the truths that this movie is pointing out. The magic is real. You just have to acknowledge that just like there was magic in the 20s, there's magic in the 2010s.
Yeah.
Right? The magic is around you, man. You know?
Yeah, the magic doesn't end until like 2014, probably.
Yeah, probably. I mean, if this had come out 4 years later, we might have been Let's talk a little bit about Kurt Fuller's performance as John. Him and the mom both, Helen, are just wretched people throughout this.
Yes.
Like complaining about things being cheap.
Cheap is cheap.
Yeah, cheap is cheap. They're just so unpleasant, so grossly unpleasant the whole time. And yet, Kurt Fuller is hilarious all the time, too.
Yeah.
I love the detective subplot in this movie. It's almost pointless. Like, it's basically a setup and a punchline. And that's
it's
all
a throwaway joke at the end, yeah.
But it is so great. And it speaks to the fact that everyone has this period they look back on and think, man, I'd love to see it. You know, I'd love to just walk in there and be able to look at it.
When all that got set up, the detective was following Gil and hiding behind the corner with a cigarette in Paris, you know.
It's such a great shot.
Yeah, it's a great shot. Okay, I know who this is. We're talking about Sam Spade over here, right? I foolishly hoped maybe that the detective was going to give us some kind of idea about how it actually worked.
It doesn't matter! No, yeah.
You know, but at the end of the day, it's a throwaway joke because he ends up in the Middle Ages.
Yeah.
Because I guess that's what he romanticizes.
Yeah, I love it. They're like, well, where's the detective? I don't know. He disappeared. Cut to like 1700s or something, and he's in like
off
French,
with his head.
Yeah. Just being chased around by guards. He's just stumbling around a palace like, where am I?
That was great. I guess one of the things I would also like to mention is one of the things that really stuck out to me is that he is dismissing my highest aspiration
of being a screenwriter.
I'm having trouble because I'm a Hollywood hack who never gave actual literature a real shot until now.
Please, Gil, honey, just promise me something. If this book doesn't pan out, that you'll stop beating your brains out and just go back to doing what you do best. I mean, the studios adore you, you're in demand. Do you really want to give it all up just to struggle?
He is a Hollywood hack who never gave real literature a chance. My dream job is to write for Hollywood.
But isn't that the point of the movie? That's it, man. You're looking at this and saying, Gil, you got it all, man. What are you talking about? You're living the life. And he's like, nah, I really want to be like Hemingway. Right. That's it. That's the movie.
Yeah.
In a nutshell. It's like,
Nate, you've written some comic books. Yeah, but wouldn't it be great if I had a,
podcast?
I love this podcast. Don't get me wrong.
This is fun.
I love it. But at the same time, I would love to take a crappy rewrite job.
Oh, man. Yeah, I would love that.
The closest I ever got, I did a treatment for a potential animated movie based on my comic book. And there was a time when I thought, okay, well, this is my step this close to getting into a writer's room for a television series. All of that has gone by the wayside at this point, and this guy's got it. But he wants to be the great American novelist.
It's always a matter of perspective, man, and you only get that perspective through living.
Now, would you rather write a movie script or a novel?
Probably a novel.
Yeah, okay. Well, screw you too.
Look, because I can do that by myself. I don't need to rely on teams of hundreds of people. And then if I get blacklisted, it's all my fault.
Yeah.
And nobody's going to buy my book anymore. And
well,
it's on me.
Don't go getting blacklisted now because I want to keep the podcast alive.
Being a novelist keeps you straight because it's like, yeah, I'm still watching Woody Allen movies. Is he still collecting paychecks? Probably. But if it was just Midnight in Paris, a novel by Woody Allen, I probably never would have read it.
Fair.
Speaking of screenwriting, though, just about every line in here is just snappy and clicks. It is a very well-written movie, and I gave up after a while trying to write down lines that I loved because I couldn't write fast enough to keep up with them. I mention Hemingway. Every single line Hemingway has is perfect. It is rock solid.
What are you writing?
Novel.
About what?
It's about a man who works in a nostalgia shop.
What the hell is a nostalgia shop?
A place where they sell old things, memorabilia. And does that sound terrible?
No subject is terrible if the story is true, if the prose is clean and honest, and if it affirms courage and grace under pressure.
You know, can I ask you the biggest favor in the world? No.
What is it?
Would you read it?
Your novel.
Yeah, it's like 400 pages long, and I'm just looking just for, just an opinion.
My opinion is I hate it.
I mean, you haven't even read it.
If it's bad, I'll hate it because I hate bad writing. If it's good, I'll be envious and hate it all the more. You don't want the opinion of another writer.
Yeah, it's just, you know what it is? It's just, I'm having a hard time, trusting somebody to evaluate it.
Writers are competitive.
I'm not going to be competitive with you.
You're too self-effacing. It's not manly. If you're a writer, declare yourself the best writer. But you're not as long as I'm around, unless you want to put the gloves on and settle it.
No, I don't.
I love, he just randomly throws in, you box? Like he's constantly trying to fight people. The second night that Gil travels back, he steps into the car and Hemingway's in the car.
Right.
And he starts talking about the physical act of love.
Right.
And starts talking about making love as a moment where you lose the fear of death and transcend to this other place. And he's asking Gil, like, you've experienced this? He's like, well, I've got a fiance. She's pretty good looking. He's like, so you know what I'm talking about? He's like, no, that doesn't happen.
Yeah, Owen Wilson is great in this too. We don't want to gloss over him.
I don't want to gloss over him at all. He does such a good job delivering these Woody Allen lines. Like
he does a great Woody Allen.
I can't imagine a lot of people being able to step into that specific character type shoes and make it work.
Yeah.
But Owen Wilson is so good at just playing like a hapless doof.
Yeah, the thing about Woody Allen, and I'm not a huge Woody Allen fan, but we all know what Woody Allen looks like. So when he puts himself in this movie, for example, and he's got a character like Inez and he's got a character like Adriana, and he can basically have either one of them if he really wanted it, that's Woody Allen.
Yes.
It's played for a joke when it's Woody Allen, right? Because looking at him, this person does not go with either of these two. Owen Wilson, in a strange way, is a pretty good-looking guy. Like, he's got one of those quirky faces that can very well be attractive to people. I think he's a pretty good-looking guy.
The Wilsons are an attractive bunch.
Yeah.
And he's just got this charm about him, he's just a very charming guy. So is Luke Wilson. Like, they're both very just charming guys. There was an episode of The X-Files built around how charming Luke Wilson is.
Yeah, that's a good episode. That's a good episode. And it's very believable that Owen Wilson could have this choice. Just does a wonderful job, and he's so enamored with everything around him and the life that he's leading, going back to the 20s every night. He's living the dream, and you can see it on his face. He's just loving it.
Yeah, the way his face, especially on that initial night he spends there, the way his face kind of changes as he's sitting there, especially after he leaves the party with the Fitzgeralds and Cole Porter.
I think I know the part you're talking about.
And they're all just sitting there listening to music, and it pans across the crowd and finds his face, and he's just in the complete daze. And then he looks over at Zelda Fitzgerald next to him, and then looks forward again, and his whole demeanor just kind of like, this is real. I am here. She's real. That's real.
Right now I'm working on a novel.
Oh, yes? I'm Zelda, by the way.
Hi.
Oh, Scott?
Yeah.
Scott.
Yes,
come
what
over
is
here.
it, sweetheart?
Here's
Sure.
here's a writer from,
a
where?
writer. California. Scott Fitzgerald. And who are you, old sport? Gil. The same names as...
As what?
Scott Fitzgerald and...
Scott and Zelda Fitzgerald, the Fitzgeralds. Isn't she beautiful?
Yes. Yeah, it's a coincidence. It's like a...
You have a glazed look in your eye. Stunned, stupefied, anesthetized, lobotomized.
I feel like it's, even if this isn't real, I need to start absorbing this.
Yes.
He comes to a realization then that's like, don't just not believe this. Let's just go with it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Turns out it starts to affect his reality in the real world to the point where we know for sure that he is, in fact, traveling to the 20s.
Yes, in small ways. It's a very, very cool moment. But before we get to that, I want to talk a little bit about the meeting he has with the surrealists.
Good.
Which is just, it's just terrific.
It really is.
He's just told Adriana that he's engaged. This is like the second night they've spent hanging out, and Adriana has just found out that he's going to be married. He talks about how he's had panic attacks constantly since he got engaged, and I'm like, oh, okay, yeah, this all makes a lot of sense, Gil.
Yeah.
And he's on his way out after she kind of brusquely walks away from him, and he ends up at a table with Salvador Dali, portrayed by
Adrian Brody.
Adrian Brody, yes. It just, one scene, so many characters in this movie are just like, they pop up for like 2 or 3 minutes. Mm-hmm. And Adrian Brody's Dali, once again, is just everything you would expect. He just loses himself in that role so much. It's so incredible.
And all of these historical figures are so accommodating to Gil.
Just like, have a seat.
Yeah, exactly.
They're all so eager to talk. The only one who's a little bit...
That's the one part that's a little, yeah, sure. They are all just, yeah, come live in my inner circle.
Fitzgerald meets him, like, what kind of books do you write? And he's like, well, it's a book about a... I'm sorry, where am I? You know, like,
and the next thing you know, they're best buddies. Like, literally the next scene. So, but yeah, the surrealist.
Yeah, he's sitting there with Dali. Dali is talking about a rhinoceros. What he says about painting Gil makes a lot of sense until he starts talking about a rhinoceros, right? Not really sure
Still
where
makes
that's coming
sense
from.
to Dali.
Yeah, and that's all that really matters. But he's joined by Man Ray and Luis Buñuel, who all are surrealist painters. He starts explaining his situation to them. He says, his exact words are, I get in a car and I slide through time. And Man Ray is like, exactly correct. You inhabit 2 worlds. So far, I see nothing strange.
Yeah, exactly.
Like that's
what's
wonderful.
so good. Yeah,
They don't
he's just
think
like, oh, of course. What are you talking about?
Of course you are. God, they just see the world in such a different way that, like, this just is something they take in stride. You know who they would have gotten along really well with?
Yeah, I do.
Von Stopp, the professor.
The guy that wrote the book.
The guy that wrote the clock that went backwards.
Yeah, what was his
Von
name?
Stopp was the one that was like, hey, what happens yesterday can impact today, but what happens today can impact yesterday. What difference does it make? It's the same theory.
Yeah, that is a wonderful scene, and it's good because it's also played for a laugh. This movie is also funny.
It's very funny.
And I would never call it like laugh out loud funny. When I talk about laugh out loud funny, I'm thinking the Big Lebowski.
Yeah, well, that's just like your opinion, man.
But
yeah,
this is more like very amusing all the time.
Yes. Pervasively amusing.
Yeah, yeah.
Rated PG-13 for pervasive amusement.
I did want to talk about that scene because it is fun that they're just like, he's trying to unburden himself of this confusion and the reality of his time travel. And they're like, yeah, right.
Yeah, I see nothing strange.
What are you talking about? What's wrong?
Yeah, okay. And your point is?
That's perfect. It's so funny.
So let's talk the time travel a little bit. As Gil says, he gets in a car, he slides through time. That's it. He is at a street corner on these steps. The clock strikes midnight, and then this car pulls up. He gets in the car, and it goes off down the road, and once he gets out, he's in the 1920s. And that's how the time travel works. Now, it doesn't have to be any more complex than that. It's not even about scientific time travel. This is magic. This is the magic of Paris at work. But the question is what Gil's experiencing real in the sense that what he does in the past could have an impact on the future? Now, the movie doesn't have to answer that. It doesn't really matter, because that's not the kind of movie it is.
Well, when they introduce it, he's inebriated. So,
yeah,
if you didn't know ahead of time, you could assume that this is some kind of hallucination.
Sure. Sure.
As Inez seems to think it is.
But eventually we do get concrete proof that this is happening in a very, very clever way. So, former First Lady of France, Carla Bruni, plays the tour guide at the museum here.
This I did not know.
Yeah, she's the one that refers to Paul as a pedantic fellow because he's trying to correct her all the time about the Rodin. But Gil keeps going back to her whenever he has a question, not about Paris. At one point he goes back and says, hey, do you think you could love two people at the same time? You know, like asking her existential questions.
That subject had been broached with her prior.
That's true.
You know, so
that's true. They had talked about it within the context of
Rodin and his mistress and his wife Rose.
That's right. That's right.
Camille and Rose, right?
Yes.
Camille?
Yeah, I think so. So he keeps going back to her, and at one point he runs across this diary at a stand on the side of the road. And it turns out to be Adriana's diary from like the 20s.
Right.
And so
coincidental.
He takes it to Carla Bruni and she starts translating it. And it's great because she wrote in her diary that she had a dream that Gil would bring her earrings and then they would make love. And Gil's face is just like, gotta go get
Where
earrings.
can I get a pair of earrings?
Gotta go get earrings. And it leads to a really funny scene where he tries to steal a pair of Inez's earrings and box them up to go give to
yeah, see, I didn't laugh at that.
To give to her.
That was just kind of cringy for me. Like, I understand other people find that kind of thing funny. Basically, he's on the cusp of getting caught for cheating.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
That part of it is the one part where
he's the least sympathetic.
And I don't like this about him. And I don't like watching this scene, and I don't like seeing him get away with it. So that part just kind of viscerally hit me with,
I think the degree to which it works is largely based on how unlikable we know Inez and her family are at that point. Still doesn't make it right, but it's like we get why Gil is thirsty.
Right, sure.
As the kids might say.
I would never argue with the idea that he shouldn't be drawn to Adriana, but it was just that taking the earrings is like, why would you just stop by a store? It's time travel. You got all the time in the world.
Yeah.
Actually, I guess that's not true because it only happens at midnight. He's got to be there at midnight as the car comes by.
Yeah.
So he does have a limited amount of time.
So we do see through that yes, Gil is time traveling. He's just sliding. So this is a time slip scenario where he just involuntarily goes back through time. He has no control, no agency over it. It's just a thing that happens to him. And then he comes back at the end of the night.
They never show how he gets back.
The very first time he leaves the bar and walks down the street, and when he turns around, the bar has turned into a laundromat.
Right.
He's just back. There's no effect. There's nothing happens. He's just walking down the street, and then he looks up, and he's in 2010 again.
Visually, that tells me that as soon as he's alone, he's back. But that's not true either.
I don't think so. I don't think so.
So there's no real explanation for how he falls back to the modern day.
You could say, like, maybe it's just a certain time of day. Once the night is over, he's back. But
well, I mean, they never explain it. They never give you any kind of idea, and that's okay.
And they don't need to.
It does. Yeah, it doesn't work.
Because the other thing is that we know from Adriana that you can stay there if you really want to. Adriana chooses to stay in the late 1800s as a costume designer.
Well, we don't know what the resolution of that is.
We can assume she didn't come back. We can also assume that detective never made it back. But that might be because he was killed.
Yeah, maybe he lost his head.
So the time travel method is very, very simple. It is, as Bruce Willis in Looper might say, not important. The details of how it works aren't important. How it works is Parisian magic, because that's what this whole thing is about. It's about the magic and mystery of Paris. There are no rules to speak of in terms of, like, he can have minimal impact on the future through Adriana's journal. But this isn't the kind of movie where you're going to see Gil say, I could go kill Hitler.
Right, no.
And eventually, like I said, the visual language of the movie allows it to eventually just stop showing you Gil even getting in the car. You just know that this is happening night after night after night. And one of the coolest things that this movie does is in the very final scene after Gil is broken up with Inez and he's out there on the bridge looking at the Eiffel Tower, and he meets Gabrielle, the shopkeeper, played by Léa Seydoux, who they've bonded over Cole Porter, whom Gil knows personally at this point.
Doesn't just recognize him from sheet music anymore.
Right. When they're on the bridge, you hear the bell strike midnight. And so, like, Gil has kind of broken this nightly cycle at this point. It's like this final moment where Gil chooses 2010.
Right.
So I liked that the movie kind of ends on that bell ring.
Hey, hi.
Hey! Wow. Good to see you. Wow, what are you doing here?
I'm returning from dinner with friends.
Oh, okay.
I live here.
Oh, yeah.
And you? What are you doing here?
I was just out for a walk. Yeah, I've decided I'm moving to Paris.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
I'm sure you will love it.
Yeah. You think so?
Yeah. You know, I thought about you the other day because
Really?
my boss got a whole new album of Cole Porter songs.
And that made you think about me. I like to be thought of that way. Yeah. You're on your way home right now?
Yes.
Can I walk with you, or I'll buy you a cup of coffee, or okay, now it's starting to rain.
No, but that's okay. I don't mind getting wet.
Really?
Yeah. Actually, Paris is the most beautiful in the rain.
I feel like that's what I'm always saying. I couldn't agree more with you. Yes, it is more beautiful.
By the way, my name is Gabrielle.
Gil. Yes.
Nice to meet you.
It's a pretty name.
Yeah, and they gave us just enough of the shopkeeper to have that be significant.
Yes.
She makes a couple of appearances, they make a small connection, and she's alluring and cute. You can see why they'd be drawn together.
They have similar interests. It's funny because they have 2 scenes together prior to that last scene in the movie. Mm-hmm. She runs like a nostalgia shop, you know?
Yeah,
like it's just like little knickknacks and like Cole Porter albums and things like that. So it's like immediately you know that this stranger we've just met, Gil has more in common with her than Inez.
Right. You can see the chemistry right away. And the conversation at the end of the movie when they recognize each other starts with, I was thinking about you the other day when this music came in.
Yeah.
And it just kind of right away illustrates the fact that she thinks about him outside of work. He made enough of an impact on her that he's not just some stranger that happened by her shop. So, you know, it's like just a little nugget.
Yeah.
We're letting Adriana go because she got in that horse and buggy, which I also think is super cool, that it's a car to the 20s and a buggy to the 1990s.
Yes, yeah, like the mode of transportation changes
mode is so cool.
based on the era. That's really, really cool.
Yeah, we've just let her go.
If this movie gets remade in, like, say, like the year 2080, I bet a Cybertruck is going to pick them up.
Oh, a Cybertruck. Yeah. Who wants to come back to this time?
No,
this is...
And I realize that's the point of the movie's trying to make, but guys, let's be honest. We are living in the worst possible period in human history right now. And the bubonic plague was a thing.
Yeah. You know, you want to see them together, and then it closes as deftly as it opens with just the most obvious... It starts to rain, and she's willing to walk with him in the rain.
It's the perfect bookend. It's the most obvious way to end it, and it is the way it has to end.
Right.
With these two, like the first line of the movie is, this city would look beautiful in the rain. Oh, I hate the rain. And here it's like, oh, look how beautiful the city is in the rain. I love the rain. And we walk off together into the rain.
Yeah. This movie, if not so richly set and not so well shot and played, it's really just screenwriting 101.
Yeah.
The most basic, effective storytelling that you can tell. And I love that.
Yes.
That's not a dig.
This doesn't feel like it has to be showy and flashy.
No,
you know?
Sometimes going back to basics is... I mean, Star Wars is also like 101.
Yeah, it's a formula that works for a reason.
Exactly. Yeah. And this is very, very simple. The characters are very... archetypal, except the ones that matter, right? like Gil, despite what I said earlier in the podcast, Inez is probably flat one-dimensional for a reason, you know, and it just works.
Even the people that suck in this movie, they don't suck.
Who are the people that suck?
Well, Paul, Inez,
the parents.
Her parents. They suck in the most delightful way. Everyone in this movie is really, really good.
Yeah.
And the fact that we can loathe Paul the way we do speaks to Michael Sheen's performance.
And at the same time, recognize him as somebody who could exist.
That we all know
somebody like that.
We all know a Paul. I may be Paul.
I was thinking I might also be Paul.
I'm very, very possible.
Yeah. Well, I find you insufferable.
Yeah, I know. Ditto.
I can only put up with you for 2 hours a week. I don't have much more to say about this actual movie. I think it's really well done with a lot of romantic thoughts and feelings. And the bigger point is what Gil and what we should think of the world and how we should look at the world.
And our life and where we are and recognizing the potential in the moment we're in rather than pining for the wonder of days lost.
Right. While still appreciating what was there.
Right.
If you're going to build a time machine into a car, why not do it with some style?
Time travel wise, this chariot can look like whatever it needs to take you wherever you have to go. But for the sake of this movie, what we're really talking about is this cool, like, 1920s top-of-the-range car produced from 1925 until 1928.
Oh, a Peugeot?
Peugeot, there you go. Peugeot Type 176.
Yeah.
So where does this rank, then, on the list of time travel mechanisms that we're ranking? That currently consists of...
I like it.
In order, we've got the train... the little train track with the car.
Time machine from Time Cop.
Time Cop. We've got the sort of bathysphere
from Looper, and
then the titular clock that went backward.
The clock that does not go.
Your clock don't go. And then we've got this stylish ass car that just, you get in, they immediately give you champagne, and it whisks you back.
Would you judge it by the car, though? I think I would just judge it by the
champagne.
At midnight, the car shows up and takes you where you want to go.
Yeah.
And you just have to dream it, really. Like, I wonder if that car would have worked if Inez had stuck around. Would it have taken both of them? I don't know. There was a time he was going to take her with him to the 20s.
But she gets tired of waiting after 2 minutes.
And says, don't wake me up when you get home.
God, what a bitch.
So I think it has something to do with Midnight at Paris and his disposition as a dreamer.
Yeah, she couldn't have gotten in the car. I don't think.
Right. So this magical aspect to it that I really enjoy, and just the notion that you could stand on a street corner and have the car show up and pick you up. I like it.
I like it too. I think this is top of the line. And I also...
Ooh, really? Okay.
I think
I don't know if I'd go that far.
But the other things to consider is that it's a fancy old car, just picks you up, takes you to a bygone era, takes you to a party, usually, and no nausea. That beats most of the other methods of time travel.
Oh, I don't know. I don't think I want to put this at the top.
Okay.
I was going to put it over the clock.
It's definitely over the clock. I think it's over Looper, too.
Okay, I'll put it over Looper, but I don't want to put it over Time Cop.
Okay, all right, that's fair.
Is that fair?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
Time Cop's cool.
It is. I love... It's going to be hard for me to top that, but that's just me. We're trying to get a consensus here. If you're willing to go below Time Cop and over Looper, we'll put it there.
I will put it under Time Cop, but only just.
Okay, fair.
This is a hard one to top for me, just because it's so effortless. All you got to do is dream.
You got to separate it from the movie. We're going to stick with our rules.
Well, hey, Nate, I went to the steps. I was trying to do it.
Well,
I separated myself from the movie and walked all the way to those steps.
Your judgment is askew.
Okay, I think your judgment is askew.
I'm not. I'm not. It's true. I'm not the most objective critic of this method of time travel.
That's okay. I
guess I just didn't
like
dream
it.
hard enough, or I hadn't. You know what it was? I should have gone after the absinthe bar. That was my mistake.
Well, that photo you showed me of you sitting at the steps, it was clearly daytime.
It was daytime, yeah. It was later
So
in
you
the
just
afternoon.
got to wait around.
I just got to wait later next time.
Yeah, got to wait around.
Well, folks, thanks for listening. Remember, subscribe to the feed so you never miss an episode, and be sure to tell all your friends who love time travel and maybe pine for days of old. We're also available on YouTube in an audio format. You can like, comment, and subscribe there. You can send us some emails at OHBoyQLPod@gmail.com. Hey, what do you think about that original plan to bring Sam Beckett into the fold?
Oh, my goodness.
Here's what I want to do. I want to have a whole episode that is just reading letters about how much the reboot would have succeeded if Sam Beckett had just been part of it. So if you guys could get on that, that's great.
Well, I can start tonight by reading one. I feel like we need to shout this guy out. We got an email response to our last episode from a gentleman that's actually been reaching out to us more than once, Jeff Richardson, if you're out there listening, which I assume you are.
If you're still listening at this point in the episode, yeah, thanks for listening, Jeff.
Hey, yeah, thanks for being fan number one, it seems. But he sent us a note about the clock that went backward.
Wow. Okay.
He says, I love the storm imagery and your read on it. It's funny that this story was obscure by the time Doctor Who came about because the time vortex and the roop, roop noise definitely evoke storms.
Oh, that's
now,
really
I'm not
interesting.
familiar with that noise, but I think this email might be more aimed at you.
Yeah, no. The time vortex definitely, like, when the TARDIS is shown traveling through time, there's a lot of storm imagery, like lightning and swirling clouds and stuff. That is a really interesting observation. And, you know, the call box itself is just this big rectangular thing.
Right. I think what he was driving at was we were talking about how transformative storms can be.
Yeah.
Because we don't have any control over it, you know? And I'm glad that you picked up on that. I'm glad that you joined the conversation, Jeff.
Like an implied lack of control there. Yeah, that's a good observation.
Yeah, and if you guys want to write into that email address, you know, maybe we'll read some more on the air.
Yeah, you guys can send any, like, haikus. If you got any time travel haikus, we'll read those. Yeah, send us whatever you want. You might be able to find us on social media, too. I'm Captain Burns, CaptnBern on Blue Sky, Brian.Lee.Martin on Instagram and Threads.
And I am at ActionNate on both Blue Sky and Threads.
And, folks, that is a wrap on Midnight in Paris. Thanks for listening. Until next time, I'm Brian.
And I'm Nate.
And we'll see you in the future.
It was a fight!